Welcome to God and Country channel. Today we're diving into most compelling DEI topic. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. We've got an epic ride ahead. So buckle up, subscribe, hit that like button, and let's get started. I want to explain how in recent years, diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives have become pervasive in corporate America, academia, and government. These programs are often introduced under the premise that systemic discrimination is the primary driver of societal disparities. However, the real reason DEI is installed into the fabric of our society is to purposely shift away from merit-based success, potentially lowering standards, fostering division, and weakening the very principles that have long fueled achievement and progress in our country. Before getting into the specifics behind this subject, it's important to understand the core foundations of DEIs, which is rooted in Marxist foundations. At its core, DEI is based on Marxist ideologies, particularly the concept of class struggle and the redistribution of power and resources. Traditional Marxism focused on economic class conflict, dividing society into oppressors and the oppressed. DEI applies this framework to identity groups, categorizing individuals based on race, gender, and other demographics rather than economic class. Here are the key Marxist influences in DEI. Marxist thought argues that fairness requires forced redistribution to achieve equal outcomes rather than equal opportunity. DEI mirrors this by prioritizing equity, which demands preferential treatment for certain groups to eliminate disparities. Marxism prioritizes group identity over individual merit, just as DEI promotes identity-based policies rather than personal achievement. DEI reinforces a perpetual conflict between so-called privileged and oppressed groups, echoing Marxist class warfare, where the oppressors must be dismantled to empower the oppressed. Marxist DEI policies lead to the dilution of qualifications in education, hiring, and promotions, which is rooted on Marxist ideologies to bring the quality of society down in an incremental way. The harmful reasons why DEI was installed into society. DEI was not implemented purely as a tool for fairness but rather as a mechanism for social engineering and political control. Many of its core principles stem from divisive ideologies that seek to restructure society based on arbitrary identity metrics rather than individual competence and effort. Governments and corporate elites use DEI to exert influence over institutions, forcing compliance with ideological narratives under the guise of fairness and inclusion. This allows for control over hiring, education, and corporate structures, ensuring ideological conformity and limiting dissent. Organizations that do not adopt DEI policies face reputational damage, financial penalties, and exclusion from key industries or government contracts. Social credit-style systems, where businesses are rated based on their DEI compliance rather than their productivity or innovation. DEI promotes identity-based decision-making instead of prioritizing skill, knowledge, and achievement. This results in underqualified individuals occupying crucial roles in business, government, and academia, ultimately harming the very institutions it claims to improve. Companies forced to prioritize diversity over experience have seen declining performance and morale due to incompetent leadership. Universities lowering standards to admit a more diverse student body leads to graduates who are less prepared for competitive fields. DEI creates a culture where individuals are categorized as either oppressors or oppressed, fostering resentment and hostility rather than cooperation and mutual success. Mandatory DEI training often forces employees to acknowledge inherent biases they may not possess, leading to a culture of fear and division in the workplace. Encouraging individuals to see themselves as perpetual victims reduces personal accountability and discourages ambition and self-improvement. By prioritizing identity politics over productivity, DEI weakens organizations, reduces competitiveness, and ultimately harms the economy. Businesses implementing DEI hiring quotas have suffered from reduced efficiency and lower innovation, as merit-based hiring is replaced by identity-based selection. Public institutions prioritizing DEI initiatives over efficiency see increased bureaucracy, higher costs, and declining service quality. DEI has infiltrated educational institutions, replacing rigorous academic standards with social justice narratives. This leads to an entire generation being conditioned to prioritize identity politics over critical thinking and merit-based achievement. Public school curriculums focusing on DEI themes reduce emphasis on STEM, literacy, and history in favor of ideological programming. Universities requiring DEI statements for faculty hiring and promotion ensure that only those who conform to the ideology can advance. DEI fuels societal division by emphasizing identity politics, creating perpetual conflict rather than unity. Workplaces and educational institutions promote affinity groups that separate people based on race or gender rather than promoting collaboration and shared goals. Political leaders use DEI rhetoric to manipulate public sentiment, pitting groups against each other to gain votes and consolidate power. When businesses and government agencies prioritize DEI over efficiency and expertise, economic decline follows. Companies that adopt DEI-driven hiring and promotion policies often see reduced innovation, lower productivity, and financial losses as a result of placing ideology over skill. Nations that embrace identity-based governance rather than meritocratic principles often experience declining competitiveness on the global stage, leading to weakened economies and diminished national influence. Here's how DEI being used as a political tool to divide, corrupt, and destroy. DEI is not just a corporate or academic initiative. It has become a political tool used to expand government control over businesses and individuals. The rhetoric around systemic oppression creates a climate where government intervention is seen as the only solution, despite 60 years of civil rights legislation that has already leveled the playing field. The government uses DEI to justify increased regulation in the private sector. DEI programs create a permanent class of bureaucrats and consultants who profit from ongoing racial and gender grievances. DEI has been weaponized as a political tool to exert control over organizations and even entire nations. By embedding DEI principles into governance, corporations, and education, proponents of this ideology create a framework that consolidates power, stifles dissent, and prioritizes ideological conformity over competence. The path forward: a return to meritocracy. After decades of social engineering through DEI, it's time to return to the principles that made society successful. The focus should be on personal responsibility, education, and work ethic rather than government-mandated diversity initiatives. Hiring and admissions policies, selection should be based on talent and achievement, not quotas. Schools should prioritize STEM, literacy, and real-world skills rather than ideological training. Encourage individuals to take ownership of their success rather than blaming systemic oppression. Stop using taxpayer money to fund DEI programs that have little to no measurable benefit. In my conclusion, I want to reiterate that DEI is based on flawed premises, leads to harmful consequences, and weakens society by undermining meritocracy. The best path forward is not through forced diversity programs but through a recommitment to excellence, individual achievement, and personal responsibility. Meritocracy built the strongest economy in history. Let's return to it before DEI leads us further down the path of mediocrity and division.